I'm Tim Monroe, and this is what I really want to talk about. There's something fascinating about every single one of us. Everybody has a passion and a story to tell, something that lights them up. Every week I sit down with interesting people and we talk about the things that really matter to them and to all of us. It might be funny, it might be weighty, it might be weird. It's what I really want to talk about. My guest today is Murphy Monroe. Murphy is a dad and a husband. He's also a nonprofit executive, speaker, and disability advocate. He spent 18 years as director of admissions and vice president of enrollment at Columbia College Chicago, a progressive private arts and media college in the heart of the city. For the last 8 years, he has served as the executive director of the Actors Gymnasium, a nationally treasured circus school and theater company in Evanston, Illinois. He also serves on the City of Evanston's Commission for Aging and Disabilities, where he chairs the committee responsible for overseeing the city's compliance with the Americans with Disability Act. And it is not a coincidence that we have the same name. Murphy is my little brother. Welcome, Murphy. What do you really want to talk about today?
Thanks, Tim. I'm glad to be here. What I want to talk about is my favorite thing, which is nothing.
Nothing. Say more.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's nothing to say.
No, well, my favorite thing is sensory deprivation, or something better known as float therapy, which is a wellness therapy that's been in practice for quite a while, but has grown in popularity in the last maybe 20 years or so. But floating is creating a sensory deprivation space. And so, floating, that's what I want to talk about.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. But before we float away into nothing, let's talk just a little bit about your sort of your day job, running the Actors Gymnasium in Chicago, or in Evanston, I guess it is. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So for the last 8 years, I've had the joy of leading a really special nonprofit organization in Chicago called the Actors Gymnasium. We are a circus school and we are a producing theater company. So in any given year, we teach about 1,000 students at every level, from recreational kids in camps all the way up to serious professionals. And then also, maybe the favorite part for me is we work with theater companies all over the country to help them adapt productions to have circus elements or far more physical elements in their show. And so we help a lot of companies make their theater a lot more fun.
Yeah, and it's an amazing. I've seen productions there. I've seen the school in action. It's a really cool place. There may be other places like it, but I don't know of others. Are there other places like the Actors Gym?
There are. Our focus on combining circus and theater is rare. But in some ways, all of circus, put aside Cirque du Soleil, is really mom and pop in so many ways. It's things that have been started by families or individuals and grown from there. And the circus remains that way, more likely always will, I imagine.
Yeah.
And so there are other places like us out there who take on teaching circus to kids and even then extend it up to professional training.
Right.
But we were, founded by the Looking Glass Theater Company, and our focus really is using circus to strengthen theater, and that's definitely I think we're one of a kind there.
Yeah, for sure. It's an amazing place. So thanks for talking just a little bit about that. So
thank you.
Let's start at the beginning. What is floating exactly? And some people may be familiar, some may be totally unfamiliar. So what is it exactly? And then the second part of that question is, I'm going to ask you, when did you first sort of realize or understand that floating was important to you?
So I'll just sort of paint a picture or describe floating, I think might be sometimes the easiest way to do it. So I want to imagine yourself lying on 10 inches of completely buoyant water. So water like the Dead Sea. And completely clean, completely pristine, beautiful, crystal clear water that is completely buoyant, so that when you lie on top of this 10 inches of water, Your body is perfectly suspended, absolutely weightless, no points of gravity hitting any part of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And there you are, lying on 10 inches of water, completely buoyant and weightless on top of that water. But then what we're going to do now is we're going to take that water and we're going to heat it precisely to 95 degrees, which is your skin temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 94.5 degrees, but
Mm-hmm.
right in there, we're going to heat it to your skin temperature. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the air above the water and we're going to heat the air above the water also to that exact same temperature. So the air, your body, and the water that you're floating on are all now one blended temperature. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off the lights. Because with the lights off, your brain has a really hard time tracking where that water ends and where the air begins.
Mm-hmm.
And so after about 10 minutes in the darkness, lying still in this blended atmosphere, blended temperature atmosphere, the water goes away. And now you are really, truly just floating. You have no sense of water around you. You have no sense of any stimulus on your body whatsoever. There's an absence of light, absence of smell, absence of sound, really an absence of completely all stimuli, allowing for a whole different kind of relaxation and a different kind of space that allows for all sorts of different kinds of healing and healing modalities.
So, and I can attest, I've floated a couple times in my life, and you cannot try as you might, you can't sink. And you do stay in this floating, situation, and if you let it happen, exactly what you're talking about happens. You sort of enter this state of, I guess, sensory deprivation, for lack of a better phrase. So what? Let's talk about how this has affected you personally. So when did you discover floating, and when did you know, wow, this is something that I really love?
Well, the first time I floated was in the late 80s at a place in Chicago called Space Time Tanks when I was, an adolescent.
Mm-hmm.
But before then, it was already very clear to me that my favorite places were dark, private, secure, confidential spaces. And so, like growing up, I would really love being not just in the closet in my bedroom, but behind all of the clothes in the closet with my bedroom, with
Right.
the light turned off and the door closed, where you just feel like safe and anonymous. And so way before I ever floated, I was in touch with the idea that I really liked spaces that were like still and dark.
Mm-hmm. So going back, so when you say the late 80s, because you're my brother, I know that in the late 80s you were 13, 14, 15 years old, right?
Right,
So
right.
quite young. You're younger than I am. And so you knew already, you knew something that experience you were gonna like it.
Yeah.
Because that's really like 14 years old going to a sensory deprivation tanks. I don't think many 14-year-olds.
So you're dating this, and I actually am wondering now if maybe this was like maybe 1990.
Okay, so a little bit older, but still a
couldn't
teenager.
Have been, couldn't have been 91. It would have to have been 90 at the latest. Yes,
If you're
teenager
still a teenager,
for sure.
yeah,
Yes.
you're a teenager.
Yeah.
And you knew somehow that this was right for you.
I did. I
Yeah.
knew that I liked darkness, and I knew I didn't have this word for it, but what I really liked is like the concept of anonymity, of just being somewhere where you can't be found, somewhere where you just are just absolutely nothing but you, and it's selfish in a way. But being in a space where there is absolutely nothing to interact with other than me. for most of my life, I was too much for me even. And
Hmm.
so hard to, we should just say for your listeners that I'm autistic,
Hmm.
um, part of what comes along with having that type of brain
Hmm.
is a lot of hypersensitivity to things, and then
Hmm.
also hypo
Hmm.
sensitivity to things
Yeah.
that causes a lot of noise and a lot of overwhelm.
Hmm.
And so a big part of that was why I was seeking quiet spaces.
Hmm.
Now, when I floated for the first time, I wouldn't say that I immediately loved it or I immediately was like, I
Yeah.
need to do lots more of that.
Hmm.
I was thrilled to have done it. It felt novelty. Um, it didn't feel, if you go to a float center now and they're all over and folks can find one near them, very likely,
Hmm.
it's a spa experience. They're
Yeah.
extremely clean,
Yeah.
very, it's a spa experience, but it was not so much in the
Back
late
then.
80s,
Yeah.
early 90s in
Yeah.
Chicago. It was not a clean experience. And so
Hmm.
I wasn't completely but it stuck with me.
Yeah.
Having done it just absolutely stuck with me. And me seeking out quiet spaces has just always been a theme. It was really about maybe 10, 12 years ago now that a float center opened up in my hometown of
Yeah.
Evanston, Illinois. And as soon as it did, I was like, oh my God, I got to go. And I
Right.
went, and Float One was uh, right away
Yeah.
was clear to me that this was a really good space for me.
Yeah, and so I think we can all relate. You used a couple words to describe what you were looking for through floating, through sensory deprivation. Use the word anonymity. You said somewhere where you can't be found, and I think a lot of people pursue that in different ways, right? I think some people through exercise, maybe they get that sense, or maybe through art or through some sort of passionate thing
Absolutely.
that they do by themselves, reading, for instance.
Yes. Gardening.
Yeah, lots of things that people can do that get them in that state. And I think we can also all remember, maybe as kids, we did this a lot, is like building forts in your house. Like we had bunk beds and we draped the blankets over the bunk beds, so you made this cave-like environment that you could hide in and pretended that your parents didn't know you were there or whatever. And you could be alone, especially in a family like ours where we had four siblings and dogs and mom and dad and lots of people around, and so you sometimes you just wanted to disappear.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so you have actually now turned this passion into not just a passion, but also an avocation. And so, what is it that you now are running a float spa in Skokie? It's in Skokie, right? Skokie, Illinois,
Yeah. Skokie,
right,
Illinois. Yeah.
right next to Evanston. And so you have lots of people coming that you can share this with. So, what are some of the things that people come in and say about floating? Like, what are the benefits that
Mhm.
it provides for your clients?
Yeah, I love that. So we have yeah, so I floated in a local spa in Skokie, Illinois, and one day it went up for sale, and just took the chance to buy it because I was just so passionate about floating itself, along with our sister Heather, as you know.
Mhm.
So the people who come in here are to a person incredible,
Yeah.
but wildly different.
Hmm.
I didn't know what to expect exactly from who would be floating or why.
Hmm.
Um, so we have folks who come and float every day.
Hmm.
We have other folks who come and float once a week. Floating happens for an hour at a time, generally.
Hmm.
Some for 90 minutes, but
Hmm.
generally an hour. And then we have others who come at least once a month, and it's just a regular part of their wellness routine. So some of them are athletes. We have, you're talking about being buoyant. We have, 7-footers in here floating. And we also have some really large humans
Yeah.
who, football players who are in here floating too. And They're floating largely for inflammation
Yeah.
and muscle recovery. And
Hmm.
so the reason we're floating in this water is because there's 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt right in that water. And they've done a lot of studies on spending an hour floating
Hmm.
in magnesium sulfate like that, and
Hmm.
you uptake it,
Yep.
and it has a tremendous impact on inflammation. And so, lots of athletes are using it for recovery, and some of them aren't just using it for recovery, but are using it for performance.
Hmm.
So, as an example, Tiger Woods has a float tank, and he talks about what he does in the float tank is uses the stillness and the concentrated energy of that space with no distractions whatsoever. He uses that just to imagine in his head the perfect golf swing.
Right.
And he just maps it in his head, thinks
Yeah.
about every muscle in his body and what's happening, and then
Hmm.
he feels himself hit the ball, and then he watches the ball and he sees the ball hit into the cup.
Hmm.
And it's like a process that he goes through that he believes the like concentrated focus of the tank
Yeah.
gives him an
Right.
advantage.
Maybe you can't do that anywhere else, where there's so many other distractions around you. You
Sure
can't
thing.
sort of
Yeah,
laser guide your focus onto something. Yeah.
that's right. We
Yeah.
have a lot of folks for whom it's a sacred kind of meditative space. We have
Hmm.
um, a um, we have a conservative Jewish man who comes in here once a week, and he tells me that his time in the tank is the most sacred time he has.
Hmm.
That he is there really in a sacred space, convening with God,
Wow.
and I think that that's incredible.
Right.
We have people who are just floating purely for relaxation, an hour
Hmm.
away from the kids,
Hmm.
an hour of just peace and stillness and quiet, and that's the
Hmm.
type of thing they want.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole nother side of floating,
Yep.
which is really how floating started.
Hmm.
Floating was started by a scientist named John C. Lilly, who was ultimately someone who was deeply interested in exploring alternative forms of consciousness. He was interested in out there concepts like could dolphins and humans find a way to successfully communicate?
Hmm.
And are there other kinds of consciousness available to humans other than the lived experience that we
Right.
all have from
Right.
day to day? And
Yeah.
so, and he was one of the first scientists to study ketamine. So he was
Yeah.
really like interested in alternative consciousness and in all sorts of ways.
Right.
And he invented the flow take really for that purpose, creating a concentrated space where one could really free their mind, make their mind so neutral and so free that they might be able to access either other forms of consciousness or other types of experiences within their brain. Maybe it's liminal dreaming
Yeah.
or beyond.
Hmm.
So we do have a fair amount of folks who are coming here to take advantage of that potential power of the float tank.
Do they come
And
having do any of those come having maybe taken something to enhance?
no, 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 no. Yeah, absolutely not.
You don't allow
I
that.
mean, no, no, nobody would want it.
Yeah.
I tell people that the float tank isn't for drugs. The
Right.
float tank is
Is
drugs.
it true? Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it's a space that you can find alternative consciousness without psychedelics.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the goal of those who are doing that work. Although we do have a relationship with some ketamine therapists
Right.
who are going through ketamine therapy with patients and then
Hmm.
have them come float in between their ketamine sessions
Hmm.
as a way of processing
Yeah. Yeah.
and a way of processing those experiences and thinking through that trauma.
Right. So I'd love to go back a little bit and talk about your own relationship to floating. You mentioned your autism and the challenges that that can provide you, but I know that you didn't know, you didn't discover you were artistic till much later in life. Like as a child, as a young man, you didn't, that was never diagnosed. So what has it meant for you personally? What do you think are the benefits that have really made a difference in your life for you?
Yeah. So I just want to rewind a little bit on that.
Yeah.
It definitely was not diagnosed. I was told I had something called Asperger's the first
Yeah.
time, I think when I was about 14.
Okay.
But I knew from the beginning. It was just inside my brain at the earliest age I can conceive of.
Mhm.
I had a fundamental understanding that my brain worked differently than everybody else's.
Mhm.
It was really clear to me from as early as I can remember that I had a different way of understanding things, and that I had to translate things, and that um, I don't know how to explain it other than I knew I was different. I didn't want anybody to know, and I was scared of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the has been the power of the float tank for me.
Right.
Yeah, so like one of the things on the autism spectrum is interoception.
Mhm.
Like interoception is our eighth sense. It's the way our body talks to us, and so we're all able to, or on a different spectrum, we're all able to hear from our body. Our body tells us when we're hungry. Our body tells us when we have to
Right.
pee.
Right.
Our body tells us when we're overheated.
Yeah.
All those types of things.
Right.
And so for autistic people, that's something that they experience either in a hyper way or in a hypo way.
Okay.
And so it can
So
fall into that. Yeah, go ahead.
so they're either more aware of those things or
Yes,
less aware of those things. It can
correct.
be either way,
Yes,
right? Okay.
that's really ultimately how the autism spectrum works.
Yeah.
Is it's a whole series of things upon which you may have, depending on your brain wiring, you may have either really strong connections between, or have islands where there is no connection
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So at one end of that spectrum is apraxia, and apraxia is no connection between
Yeah.
mind and body.
Mhm.
So a lot of autistic folks, especially nonverbal autistic folks, who really live in their head. They don't even know their body is there. They're not aware that that arm down there is theirs or connected to them. And it's a really, it's a hard way to be. And then there's the other end of that spectrum, where you are hyper aware of all of these things, and they're speaking to you really loudly all the time and overwhelming you.
And that's more the way you are, right?
No, not in terms of interoception. I
No.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I have very poor interoception. I do not
Okay.
have anything at all like apraxia. But for instance, I don't feel a lot of hot or cold.
Okay.
It's a little personal for this podcast, but I've had a really hard time with my bladder my entire life. I go to the bathroom constantly out of an effort to not get caught, not realizing I have to go to the bathroom. And I also, Sarah, my wife, will tell me I'm sick a good 48 hours before I find out that I'm sick. Those types of things. And so what happened for me in the float tank, and not that first time, but back a good 10, 12 years ago, in that float tank, I connected with my heartbeat. Just lying there in the darkness and stillness, my heart is beating. And I'm like listening to it. And I can't tell you that before that I had ever had any kind of moment of connection to my heartbeat. Or really thinking about my heart's there, and that's like what's going on in there. The same thing happened in the float tank with my lungs. I was breathing and feeling my lungs. And so to give context to that, I went to acting school, as you know, in Boston. And a big part of that program was studying vocal techniques with a woman named Kristen Linkletter. And so we would spend a whole year in a class, and we were learning to breathe through our diaphragms. And it was all about connecting breath to body. And it was just lost on 18-year-old me. I just was I was just pretending that I knew what a diaphragm was, or that I was somehow connected to it. But I do know what my diaphragm is, and I am connected to it. But it's really because of the that isolated space in the float tank where it's just me.
Hmm.
And there's just this opportunity to get to know yourself and connect with yourself in a very different kind of way.
So how do you experience that? So my experience is not unlike yours, and you float all the time. I've just floated a few times, but um, I do recall the sense of being very aware of my heartbeat and my breath, my breathing, and sometimes that being challenging, actually, because you're like, am I breathing right? Is this because you're not typically tuned into it? You just do it and you don't think about it. But when you're in this
Yes,
tank,
yes,
you're
yes.
hearing it, you're feeling it, you're very aware of it on a different level. And so at first it was like, I don't like this. I feel I'm too conscious of it, and I'd like to not think about it. But after a while, I think you kind of can relax into it and let it kind of go. But I'm sure not everybody can get there. So what does making that connection, that I get, I don't know, it's not quite the mind body connection, but you just being aware of those functions, what has that done for you?
Um, it's I mean, so the it's I don't know how to I don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't sound overstated because
Yeah.
it's really been everything to me.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I it's been a long time. Your intro, you're saying I worked at Columbia College Chicago for many years, and I
Hmm.
was head of enrollment there, and it was
Hmm.
great.
Hmm.
But um, I was really hurting myself. I was really working at an optimum level
Hmm.
with doing a lot of pretending
Yeah.
and a lot of uh, um, exposing myself to a lot of things that were too much for me and not sort of allowing any knowledge of that and just going and
Hmm.
going and going.
Hmm.
Um, and I look back on that period of my life with pride, but also with a whole lot of regret
Yeah.
about ways that I could have been a more fully integrated person, and not just for the benefit of others, but really for the benefit of me and my family.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and so, with now so much concentrated time in the float tank, and not
Hmm.
just a little bit, I'm a daily floater
Hmm.
for years and years now.
Yeah.
And with all that time has come um, just comfort with myself
Yeah.
and comfort with who I am. I feel in control of my body.
Hmm.
I may not be in total control all of the time, but I do.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a different kind of control over my body
Hmm.
than I ever had before, a different relationship
Yeah.
um, with my body.
Yeah.
I have a clearer head. And not that I don't have a super busy brain doing a lot of things I wish it weren't, but I have a an ability to slow myself down when I
Yeah.
need to. I
Yeah.
can take a stop from the world, and in 20, 30 seconds, I can calm myself in a meaningful way that just
Hmm.
was totally unachievable to me
Yeah.
um, in previously.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think I've become a much better version of myself by spending that concentrated time um, alone and really forced to, what you were saying before about the heartbeat or other things in the float tank feeling like too much
Yeah.
is very common. And a lot
Yeah.
of people describe their own thoughts as being too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's really real and something that, like anything else, you just kind of either break through or you give up before you break through.
So for
Um,
for you, I love that idea about what happens in your mind. You were talking about Tiger Woods, for instance, being able to really laser focus on his golf swing or whatever, and others feeling like they're maybe too in touch with what's going through their brain, and it's making them anxious, right? In that environment, in the tank environment. What's that like for you? Are you able to sort of shut your mind off, or because I know like you have a very active mind, you have a very active brain, you have a very and I think things like come at you sometimes in ways that are like you've mentioned kind of feel
For sure.
overwhelming, right?
Yes, for
So are
sure.
you able to shut that noise off in a tank?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, not just in the tank, but like in the shower, getting ready to go into the tank
Hmm.
because I am so acclimated
Yeah.
to it at this point.
It's part of the ritual.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
not every float for me is a clear-minded, easy float,
Sure. Yeah.
but most are. I'm able to just get into the tank, be in the darkness, be in the
Right.
quiet,
Right.
and come to some version of sleeping or not quite sleeping,
Hmm.
but being just in a really free kind of brain space and um, I think one thing that is interesting is, when we lie in bed and we fall asleep, even in the
Hmm.
deepest of sleep,
Hmm.
there's still parts of our brain that are actively working all of the
Sure.
time
Yeah.
because we're adjusting for gravity, we're adjusting for the bed and for
Mhm.
our arms and motions, and you're still doing these things. But after 20 minutes or so in the tank, with the combination of weightlessness and darkness, parts of your brain start to shut off and unwind that don't even during,
Yeah.
like a really good night's rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that happens for me quickly, just
Mhm.
because of the acclimation. I really quickly able to be in that kind of space. I've experienced a lot of liminal dreaming in that space.
Mhm.
And yeah, my other, yeah, I also float, and maybe even half the time, I float with some kind of intention.
Mhm.
I often take a voice recorder in with me
Mhm.
and I just speak aloud while I'm floating. If I have thoughts or things that I want to,
Mhm.
like get down, I
Mhm.
use my um, the tank for that reason.
Mhm.
Or I go in with a problem. If I
Mhm.
got a problem at, like, at Actors Gym that I'm trying to
Mhm.
solve, I have, maybe it's a people problem. There's some kind of situation between people that I need to find a solution to.
Mhm.
Well, I might just go into the tank with that and not think about anything but that.
Right.
And then often from that will come a clear answer that might not have come to me without the sort of focus of it. And that's another um, great tool about it.
Yeah. So, people talk about this concept of the mind body split or, balancing the mind and the body. And I don't know if that's what floating does for you, but I think about that a lot. I have this saying I say to myself all the time that I feel like I'm at war with the physical world all the time. And I'm losing the I'm losing the war. And I think a lot of us feel that way. I don't feel that so much in my head, but more physically. Like
Yeah.
I physically challenged sometimes, I feel. And um floating does, I think, take that away, at least temporarily, right? Um,
Yes.
and but I guess for me, like I think about the great sort of nirvana is that your mind and your body are sort of fused, or at least they're in balance. And one is talking to the other. Neither one is dominating the other. So what's that like for you? Do you think about that concept?
Well, I mean, I most certainly do. I definitely think about my uh, mind-body connection, and I'm certainly conscious of aging in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe less so because of interoception. I don't know,
Mm.
but I don't feel a sense of a disconnection, and I'm not saying that I've never.
Yeah.
I don't know if I it feels like an intellectual conversation more than a embodied
Mm.
conversation to me still.
Yeah. Great point.
Um, Yeah, the sort of the same way that when I was in college and I was, breathing through my diaphragm,
Right.
I feel similarly about conversations like this. I don't
Yeah.
quite know what that full
Mm-hmm.
feeling is. I
Mm-hmm.
have, like spiritual beliefs about it, or I
Mm-hmm.
have, but I don't feel it, and I don't
Mm.
know if that's something about me um, or I don't know, but yeah, I don't feel like I have a good sense of my own mind body connection, but I do feel like an integrated person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think excuse me. I think that uh the mind body thing for me, and I'm not surprised it's very different for you. Goes back to being a kid and the expectation for me, and I think it was different for you, that you're always physically active, you're playing a sport, um, you're competing physically, not you're also competing intellectually and academically, but you're also competing physically. That was sort of I don't know if it was an expectation, but it was certainly a pressure I felt, right, as a kid. And that
Absolutely.
same idea now about what are you doing physically that's making you healthier, in better shape, etc. And always sort of striving to get there, never getting there, and but just being aware of that all the time, right? And I'm sort of glad that that's different for you. Maybe I don't know because I think for a lot of people that's a it's difficult. And I do think floating is contemporarily make you forget about all that.
Mhm. Yes, has the power to make you forget about it,
Yeah.
or I hope also has the power to like there's some kind of quiet integration that's happening on the inside
Mm-hmm.
that it is growing towards a different sense of self without even necessarily knowing that's what's happening.
Right.
At least that's I think how it feels for me.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about when I first read your bio, introduced you, you talked about nothing. You said you wanted to talk about nothing.
Yeah.
So let's circle back to that and kind of maybe close this loop a little bit. When you talk about nothing, and sort of is that what you're seeking when you're in the tank? Are you seeking sort of a sense of nothingness?
Yes. Truly. I I'm looking for a zero state where I feel nothing, where there is no input, nothing being asked of me, um, and uh, yeah, I just feel very. I want aloneness. I want quiet. I want stillness. And if I can achieve not having thoughts in my head, or not too many, my left brain not, having at it. If I can achieve just a really quiet left brain and time passing with nothing but um, stillness,
Mm-hmm.
that to me is nothing. And I like that more than anything else I've
Mm-hmm.
experienced so far.
Mm-hmm. And so when you say no input, I think you mean no, do you mean like no external input coming at you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
No sound, no light, no
Mm-hmm.
nothing prickling
Mm-hmm.
at my body.
Mm-hmm.
No light for me is a big deal. As you know, I'm
Yeah.
I'm photophobic, and the light
Mm-hmm.
really bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
And the float tank provides not just dark, but true dark, like
Mm-hmm.
complete 100% absence of light, which
Yeah.
we don't normally ever get. We are in
Never.
dark environments, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not in true
No.
dark environments.
No.
And that's also part of the nothingness to me is
Mm-hmm.
just like no stimuli on my eyes whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
To me is soothing.
But I
Um,
think I think the state you're describing, the state of nothingness, and I wish there was a better word for it, but it is a state that some people seek in lots of different ways, right? I mean, I think some people may seek it through drugs or alcohol. Um, some people may seek it through, a variety of addictions.
yeah,
And
for sure.
so how has that played out in your life? I mean, when you discovered this, was it sort of just almost a miraculous thing for you, or I don't want to overstate it or make it such a big deal, but it does seem that it's just a profound exercise, a profound thing for you.
Um, yeah, it's had a bigger impact on my life than anything else. I feel really lucky to have found it, and I feel particularly lucky that I got my way into a situation where I now get to help other people
Yeah, you're in a
find
float
that
spa every day.
space.
Yeah, yeah,
Totally, it's
yeah.
really it's really something, and it has been, during COVID, when the local float spot near us closed for COVID. I went to great lengths to acquire my own float tank and put it in the
Hmm.
basement of our
Yeah,
house so
yeah.
that I could have, not just float for an hour, but float for,
Long as you
sleep
wanted.
in the float tank.
Yeah,
And it's been, yeah, I feel tremendously lucky that I found it, that there's room for it in my life, and that I now get to share it with others. It's great.
so tell us a little bit about your float spa. Where is it? What's it like in there?
Yeah, awesome. It is in Skokie, Illinois. We're just off the highway near the Old Orchard Mall. It's a 4,000 square foot facility. It's really beautiful. We have 6 float suites here, so 6 separate rooms. Each room has a float tank in it that's, you can imagine, more or less round, 8 feet.
Hmm.
And then that is inside of a private suite. That private suite has a rainfall shower in it, and a bench and dressing area. And we also have a really beautiful lounge where folks spend sometimes a lot of time
Hmm.
um, zoning out or reintegrating after they float, where um, we have concentrated oxygen, and all sorts of people spend a lot of time drawing, writing, and
Hmm.
just sort of finding peace in that space. It's one of my favorite parts about it
Yeah.
is all of these folks who were just clearly a really big part of how they keep themselves at their best selves.
Yeah. So can people walk in? Do they need to make an appointment? What's the typical experience like?
Yeah, generally best to make an appointment. Anyone who's interested in floating can go to flotationlocations.com and find out where your closest float center is. But you probably want to make an appointment, and you really just need to go there um, planning to relax. Float centers have everything you need at them. They have towels and normally hair dryers and that type of stuff. We haven't discussed it, but floating is best done in the nude,
Hmm.
because you want no stimuli on your body. And
Hmm.
so you really need to bring nothing with you to float. Um, Floating also, and I don't know if I didn't say this earlier, but pregnant people
Hmm.
is perhaps the most common group of
Hmm.
people who float.
Hmm.
One, because the weightlessness, no doubt, must feel incredible on a body that's 7, 8, 9 months pregnant.
Right.
But also, pregnant people who float have shared with me that in that space where there is that they and their baby together
Mm.
are lying in the exact same
Yeah.
circumstance.
Yeah.
They're all in the dark together. They're all in a
Yeah.
pool of water together
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
same temperature.
It is
They're all
womb-like.
feeling weightlessness,
Yeah.
and it's just like a complete bonding potential,
Hmm.
um, which is really beautiful. So we have a lot of pregnant folks coming through as well, which is
Yeah.
also like so much fun and so
Right, right,
cool.
right. And you become something of an evangelist for floating, I think, right? Maybe evangelist is the wrong word, but ambassador maybe is a better word for floating. Tell us a little about that. I think you've actually, gone around the country and spoken to people about floating.
I have, yeah. Before I ever even owned a float center, I was so into floating that I pitched myself to be a speaker at the National Float Conference,
Hmm.
just so I would be able to go and
Hmm.
see what it was all about. And yeah, there's a whole world of float center owners out there, and um, Yeah, I've had a chance to speak at a couple of conferences about floating. And then I've also had the chance to meet with and help other float center owners better understand about autism and how autism impacts floating so that they and their staffs can have language and tools to be able to support their clients.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so I just really want to, this has been a great conversation. And because you're my brother, I knew a little bit about floating, but I feel like I learned a lot more today. And I hope other people did too. It's a, I mean, it's one of those things, it's maybe not for everybody, but for the people who benefit from it, it's just, it's a really powerful thing, I think, as you've articulated very, very well. So I can't thank you enough for this time. And I'm so glad that you chose to come on and be with me to talk about what you really want to talk about and give you that opportunity. So Murph, I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you.
All right. We'll see you soon. What I Really Want to Talk About is produced and recorded in the studios of Berea College News and Radio in Berea, Kentucky. You can learn more about this podcast and listen to all of the previous episodes at whatireallywantotalkabout.com. My contact information is on the website, so please get in touch with me if there's something that you really want to talk about. I'm Tim Monroe. Thanks for listening.